Okay, so with the detailed mind map on bioenergetics and thermodynamics, we are going to focus first on the bioenergetics. It's the quantitative study of the energy transactions that occur in living cells. And the goal is to study how the living organisms acquire, transform, and utilize energy. So it concerns itself with basically the initial and the final energy states of the reaction components, and it does not concern the reaction mechanisms or how much time it takes for the chemical reaction to occur. So the biological energy transformations obey the laws of thermodynamics. Yeah, so I hope you get what bioenergetics is. We are dealing with energy transactions that occur within the living cells. Yeah, how they acquire and transform and utilize the energy. Yeah, but then the biological energy transformations usually focus or obey the laws of thermodynamics. With thermodynamics, the flow of chemical energy into an organism is equal to the energy used as work and the energy lost as heat and the chemical potential energy stored by the organism. Okay. So basically, the flow of chemical energy into the organism or an organism is equal to the energy used as work and the energy lost as heat and the chemical potential stored um, the chemical potential energy stored by the organism, and that's thermodynamics in relation to bioenergetics. It's true for organisms and also for tissues in the organisms and also for individual cells in tissues too. Yeah. So when you talk about the laws of thermodynamics, the first law is about the principle of conservation of energy. For any physical or chemical change, the total amount of energy of the in the universe remains constant. Yeah, so energy may change from form, or it may be transported from one region to another, but it cannot be created nor destroyed. So energy cannot be created nor destroyed, but can be transformed from one form to the other. That's the first law. And the forms of energy, free energy, kinetic energy, heat or thermal energy, potential energy, chemical energy, mechanical energy, electromagnetic or radiant energy. So with the second law of thermodynamics says that the universe always tends towards increasing disorder or disorderliness. In all natural processes, entropy of the universe increases. Yeah, for all natural processes. So entropy is basically the measure of the degree of randomness or disorderliness of a system. We use S to represent entropy. And when the products of a reaction are less complex and more disordered than the reactants, the reaction is said to proceed with a gain in entropy. Yeah. So when you talk about the chances of orderliness, let's take a crystalline solid in a tube, and we can change to liquid and also to gas. Also, the degree of disorderliness increases, and that is increasing entropy, and could also revert back to, but from the solid to the liquid state, the change in entropy is more than zero, and from the liquid to gas, the change in entropy is still more than, but it's still more than zero. But from the gas to liquid, the change in entropy will be less than zero, and from liquid to gas, that's decreasing in entropy. The change in entropy will be less than zero, meaning you are trying to that's like the chances of orderliness, bringing it back to order. But increasing entropy, that one, change in entropy will be more than zero, and leads to more disorderliness. The other two laws, well, focuses on the first two. So with the universe and systems, a system can be defined as all the reactants and products present and the solvent that contains them and the immediate atmosphere. So in short, everything within a confined regional space is system, and the system and its surroundings together constitutes the universe. So the universe has to do with system plus the surroundings, and there are several types of systems. With isolated systems, there's exchanges neither the matter nor energy with its surroundings, and with closed system, the system exchanges energy but not matter with the surroundings, and with open system, exchanges both the energy and matter with its surroundings. And you can think of living organisms. um, which system do you think you can place them? Of course, open system. It exchanges both the matter and the energy with its surroundings, and is most ordered system despite being an open system. And what do you think accounts for the orderliness in the living organism? They preserve their internal order by taking from the surrounding free energy in the form of nutrients or sunlight, and returning to its surroundings an equal amount of energy as heat and entropy. Okay, so basically that's how they do it. With enthalpy, that is the heat content of the reacting system. So with enthalpy, it reflects the number and the kind of chemical bonds in the reactants and products. And for most biological or biochemical reactions, it is seen that change in enthalpy is nearly equal to the change in internal energy. So biological or biochemical reactions, the change in enthalpy is nearly equal to a change in the internal energy. So let's take change in free energy. Delta G will be equal to change in the internal energy minus temperature multiplied by change in entropy. So the change in free energy, or gives free energy of a system, depends on the change in the internal energy and change in the entropy of the system. Right, so let's move on to the chemical reactions. When a chemical reaction releases heat, it's said to be exothermic, and the heat content of the product is less than that of the reactant. And enthalpy has, by conversion, negative value. That is for exothermic reactions. Reacting systems that take up heat from their surroundings are endothermic, so they have their positive values. The change in enthalpy is positive, and a reaction may be exothermic, that is changing in enthalpy is negative. Isothermic, as changing enthalpy is 0, or endothermic, changing enthalpy is positive. Yeah, so for exo and endothermic reactions, energy is conserved in chemical reactions, and the total energy of the system is the same as before after the reaction. So endothermic reactions, the endothermic reaction is cooler than the surrounding. So energy is brought into the system, and exothermic energy leaves, that's negative. Endo positive, exo negative, is hotter than the surroundings. So what gives free energy? The term free energy, well, it's used to get an equation combining the first and the second laws of thermodynamics. And when we talk about free energy, it denotes a portion of the total energy change in the system that is available for doing useful work, and under the conditions existing in biological systems, such as constant temperature and pressure, changes in free energy, enthalpy and entropy are related to each other quantitatively by equation, like changing free energy is equal to changing enthalpy minus temperature times the change in entropy. So when a reaction proceeds with the release of free energy, the free energy change, which we usually use G to represent, has the negative value, and the reaction is said to be exergonic. And so exergonic, you're dealing with that gives free energy being negative, and the system will proceed less free energy, will possess less free energy. But when changing free energy or gives free energy 0, the system is at equilibrium. And in endergonic reactions, the system gains free energy, and the free energy G is positive. So for enthalpy, that's when you're dealing with exothermic, endothermic, and for gives free energy, exergonic, endergonic. Alright, so when you take an exergonic reaction where change in free energy is less than 0, that's negative, the reaction is spontaneous. So let's take the gives free energy and time. You have your reactants up there, and then with time, when the reactants there's a reaction, there is increase in the gives free energy, and energy is released. So the product, normally there's already higher energy within the system, and then it's been released. So gives free energy, or the change in energy levels, will be less than 0. But and that's spontaneous. But for endergonic reactions where changing free energy is more than 0, you realize that the reactant starts at a lower energy, and then the reaction, the energy is increased, and the products do have higher levels of energy. So the reaction is not spontaneous. These reactions can be classified upon the free energy changes, and like I said, endergonic, exergonic. For endergonic, reactions require an input of energy to make the reaction go, and the products must contain more free energy than the reactants. But for exergonic, the reactions convert molecules with more free energy to molecules with less, and the release of energy in the form of heat, and the heat is measured in calories. So cells are isothermal systems. When we're trying to release cells and gives free energy, they are isothermal systems, and they function at essentially constant temperature, and they also function at constant pressure too. So heat flow is not a source of energy for cells, because heat can do work only as it passes to a zone or object at a lower temperature, and the energy that cells can and must use is free energy. So heterotrophic cells acquire free energy from nutrient molecules, and photosynthetic cells acquire it from absorbed solar radiation. So both kinds of cells transform this free energy into ATP and other energy-rich compounds capable of providing energy for biological work at constant temperature. So it gives free energy, allows prediction of the direction of chemical reactions and their exact equilibrium position, and the work amount of work they can in theory perform at constant temperature and pressure. The change in free energy of a forward and backward reaction, when you look at the free energy of the forward reaction, like A to B, it's equal in magnitude but in opposite in a sign to that of the backward reaction, like B to A. For example, if the change in free energy or forward reaction is negative 5 kilocalories per mole, then that of the backward reaction would be positive 5 kilocalories per mole. So equilibrium constant is something that we have to remember, and we usually represent it with K equal, and the composition of a reacting system tends to continue changing until equilibrium is reached, and at the equilibrium concentration of reactants and products, the rates of the forward and reverse reactions are exactly equal and no further net change occurs in the system. So let's take maybe that of escalator or treadmill. It's like the person is just running on a particular state or a particular stage. So the rate of the forward reaction exactly equal with no net changes. So when the reactants are first mixed, the initial concentration of the product is 0, and then the rate of the forward reaction, concentration of the product increases. Of the reverse reaction, the concentration of the products increases, but the rate of the forward reaction, the concentration of the reactants decreases. And then finally, at chemical equilibrium, the forward and reverse rates are equal and no change in concentration of the reactants and the products. For equilibrium constants, the concentration of the reactants and products at equilibrium define the equilibrium constant. And in the general reaction, A, B is equal to C, the coefficients, whether AB is small, AB is, they are just the number of molecules of the major ones participating in the equilibrium. So let's take like the equation. Equilibrium constant will be that of the product with the number of molecules square over the reactants with the number of molecules square. So if you take the example I gave, there will be C small c square capital D times D small d square all over the reactants, which are A and B, but A capital A small a square times B small b square. So when you take let's take nitric oxide or so when you balance the equation N2O5 in a reversible reaction, you get nitric oxide NO2 plus O2. So the coefficient of the nitric oxide will be 4 and that of the reactants will be 2. So something like this, the product over the reactant, so the product will be NO2 raised to the power 4 times oxygen. There is no coefficient or number of it, so and then all over the reactant, which is NO2O5 and 2. There's a concentration of all these. Alright, so the force driving a reaction towards equilibrium is referred to as the free energy change. And under transformed standard conditions, the force driving a reaction towards equilibrium is referred to as the standard transferred free energy change, which is a Gibbs free energy change. So with the standard, it has a prime and not in a prime. So changing or delta G not prime. So the relation between equilibrium constant and standard free energy changes in the chemical reaction is that the delta G dot prime is equal to negative RT natural log equilibrium constant, and that of the change in free energy delta G is equal to the standard free energy changes as delta G naught prime plus RT times the natural log of the equilibrium constant. A relationship among the equilibrium constants, standard changes in the free energy, and the direction of chemical reactions under standard conditions. Note that when the equilibrium constant is more than 1, it gives free energy is negative. The standard gives free energy as a delta G naught prime is negative, and the reaction proceeds forward. But when the equilibrium constant is 1, then standard gives free energy will be 0, and the reaction is at equilibrium. When it's less than 1, the equilibrium constant is less than 1, then it's positive and it proceeds in the reverse. So with metabolism, metabolism is a process through which living systems acquire and use free energy to carry out functions, and the sum total of all chemical reactions taking place in the organism, when you talk about metabolism, is biochemically termed as the study of the synthesis and degradation of biomolecules. So the synthesis being anabolism and the degradation being catabolism of the biomolecules. So there are pathways, and the metabolic pathway is a series of connected enzymatic reactions that produce a specific product, and the metabolic pathways consist of sequential steps. Enzymes are the basic units of metabolism, and the substrates of these enzymes are called metabolites. So with the metabolic pathways, like catabolic pathways, they release energy, meaning they are exergonic, by breaking down complex molecules into smaller compounds. And with the anabolic pathways, they consume energy, meaning endergonic, and they build complex molecules from simpler ones. Example in photosynthesis, sunlight, carbon dioxide, oxygen, glucose being formed. And so with exergonic reaction proceeds with a net release of energy, and endergonic reactions absorb energy from the surroundings. With coupling reactions, the simplest energy example of energy coupling in biologic reactions occurs when the energy requiring the energy yielding reactions share a common intermediate, and energetically unfavored reaction may be driven forward by coupling it with a favorable reaction. For example, when you take glucose plus ATP, for instance, leading to glucose 6-phosphate and ADP, the free energy, changing free energy is negative 4,000 calories per mole, and of course this will be exergonic. And with glucose 6-phosphate being changed to fructose 6-phosphate, a change in free energy is plus 400, which is endergonic. But the overall reaction, like when you combine it from glucose plus ATP to fructose 6-phosphate plus ADP, the overall reaction, the change in free energy will be negative 3,600 calories per mole, and that is endergonic, and that proceeds spontaneously. So we'll be driven forward to ATP. Of course, is an energy carrier and is composed of a ribose sugar, adenine, which is a nitrogenous base, and 3 phosphate groups. And like I said earlier, adenosine, you're dealing with the adenine and the ribose sugar without the phosphate groups. Is nucleoside, but the nucleotide adenosine monophosphate with 1 phosphate group, diphosphate, adenosine diphosphate with 2 phosphate groups, and adenosine triphosphate is the adenine with the ribose sugar, and then the 3 phosphate groups. And that's the molecular structure of ATP. And ATP, energy carried by ATP consists of the molecules I talked about, and removal of 1 phosphate group produces the ADP and 2 AMP. So for ATP, the change in free energy of hydrolysis is approximately negative 7.3 kilocalories per mole for each of the 2 terminal phosphate groups, and because of the large negative change in free energy of hydrolysis, ATP is called a high energy phosphate compound. And so with cellular work, ATP is what powers it, and a cell does 3 main kinds of work, that are chemical, transport, mechanical. So to do work, cells manage the energy resources by energy coupling, and the use of exergonic process to drive an endergonic one. So most energy coupling in cells is mediated by ATP, and this should of course tell you the uses of ATP for muscle movement, active transport of molecules against concentration gradient, synthesis of macromolecules. It carries messages from one nerve cell, that's neuron, to another Intracellular signaling requires ATP. Yeah, so many functions: synthesis of cellular components, genetic material, macromolecules, molecular transport, electrical energy or signals in neurons, and all these. Yeah, so that's it for bioenergetics and thermodynamics.